So, do you want to just tell us who you are?
So I'm Emma, a mum of now 3, living in Sutton-on-the-Forest with my husband John. Yeah, what else do I need to know?
Yeah, that's it. So
Yeah.
I guess what would be useful to know is what made you was it the pandemic that made you decide to free birth, or had you already decided to free birth?
Partly the pandemic. I'd already decided that I didn't want to give birth in hospital. Knowing this would be our last baby, I really wanted to experience having a baby at home. It was never initially the plan to do it without a midwife, but then it was made quite clear to me by the midwife that because of the pandemic and staff shortages, home birth was probably not going to happen. But in my head, it was happening because I knew that he was fine and I knew that I was fine and that the pregnancy was going along really well and we were having no issues. So I decided that I felt confident enough to do it, and I didn't let anyone try to put me off, because I feel like I was made to be scared of a home birth, not a free birth. I never told any of the midwives or anything that was my plan, but they try to put you off a home birth even with a midwife present. Having a heart condition, which I haven't had issues with for, my eldest is 7, so we're talking just over 7 years. I've birthed 3 babies and gone through 3 pregnancies with no issues, but they still want to make it an issue and they still want to create fear around that. And I found Cosmo's the first baby that I've had in York, and I found York to be the worst for creating the fear around that. You know, the consultant that I saw, she even went as far as saying that I might die if, you know, an ambulance couldn't get to me. And I think rather than putting me off, that made me want to do it more, because I almost wanted to prove them wrong, to say that this is what I'm designed to do. This is, you know, I've got confidence in my body and my baby that we can do this. And I just didn't want to be prodded and poked and it made really medical. So yeah, just on your recommendation, got that Freebirth book, read that from cover to cover. I absolutely loved that book. In fact, I've given that away to another lady who wants to free birth, because I just found that so useful, and I thought if it can give someone else the confidence to do it, then. So I gave her that book. I need to actually get in contact with her and see if she's had the baby yet, but yeah, I read that book from cover to cover, and I just thought, I can do this. This is what I'm designed to do, and I've done it twice already, so my body knew what it was doing anyway. And if I say I never felt anxious, that would be a slight lie. When my waters broke, there was a few minutes of, okay, this is actually happening now. But once I'd got in the headspace after that, then there was never a time where I thought, oh, I don't know if I can do this. I just knew that we were going to do it. It's like, I never thought something might go wrong, which maybe might be a bit naive, I'm not sure, but I just felt confident that we could do it, and that he knew what he was doing and that I knew what I was doing.
So that's really interesting. What do you think? So you've said, you know, like when the consultant was fear-mongering and you know, suggesting that you might die and all those scary things, and your sense of the midwives trying to kind of dissuade you from booking a home birth, let alone a free birth. What do you think it was that made you kind of so adamant to just say, like, well, no, I'm doing it anyway?
I think because I sort of want to rebel from the system. Like, I don't want to be a part of the system. we're trying really hard to be as out of the system as we can. And I really don't like how they make it so medicalised.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to be a part of that. I mean, I've got 3 boys, so they're never going to give birth, but I don't want them to see birth like that either. You know, maybe one day they're going to support someone who does give birth, and I just wanted them to have a different view of birth, really.
Yeah. So it's kind of believing in the physiology of birth and kind of believing in yourself. I think it certainly takes a particular type of person to have confidence in themselves and to be as in tune with themselves as you've kind of highlighted, that you just felt like everything was okay.
Yeah. And I think like doing the hypnobirth thing really helps as well. I've done that for my second and for him, and that really gets you in a good headspace. I mean, there's so much fear out there, isn't there, about birth? I mean, the people who I've told that I've free birthed think I'm crazy, and the response is always, oh, but I know someone who this happened to them, or, you know, if they hadn't been in hospital they might have died, or it always comes back with a story of fear. And even my midwife, when I said I want to home birth, she never knew I wanted to free birth, but when I said I wanted to home birth, her response was, well, I've been a midwife for 15 years and I've seen lots of things go wrong. It's like the default is always the negative. I mean, in 15 years she must have seen an awful lot of good births too, but they don't go to them. Just go to the negative.
And that's really interesting. So that was a community midwife that was saying that to you?
Yeah, quite. I can't remember exactly how many weeks I was, but it was quite near the end. And every time I saw her, she was bringing up the home birth and, oh, you know, with the heart condition and all of this stuff. And yeah, my response to her when she said that to me was actually, well, do you think that's because they've had fear in their subconscious from, you know, the midwives and everyone around them? Even the TV creates fear, doesn't it? And if you think something's going to go wrong, it's likely that it is. And that's why I tried really hard to not let any of that negativity in, because then although it's hard at times when you're being bombarded with it, but I had to just keep myself in that headspace and just trust it in Cosmo as well, that, you know, he knew what he needed to do.
Tell me a bit about that 36-week home birth assessment. I was like, I just love that, but yeah, tell us a bit about that.
I felt like I set myself up for a fight that day. I thought it would be a real battle. Turned out not to be quite as bad as I expected, but I do feel like you have to really stand your ground.
You really did.
I do feel like they make you feel like you have no choices and you do have choice. And it was down to you really to make me realise how much choice I actually had. Because it feels like when they say something to you, they're almost telling you that that's what has to happen. And that's not the case, because it's your body and it's your baby and you have the option to make the choices, but they really make you feel like you don't have that option. So I felt confident in that meeting with you there, because I knew that if I was stuck for what to say, that you would have my back. I feel like maybe if you hadn't have been there, I might not have felt as confident in that. But it's like I feel like it's like a battle, like you have to fight to get what you want. And that's wrong, isn't it? You shouldn't be that.
No, What I
And
found so
still
interesting
want to,
about that meeting is that they call it a risk assessment,
yeah,
which already, so that's the fear.
yeah.
Is
They
that
don't do that if you're having a baby in hospital.
no,
They don't want to sit there with a long list of things that might possibly go wrong if you're in a hospital, but those same things could still go wrong.
yeah,
But because you want to have your baby at home, I mean, obviously I declined to hear the long list of, I can't remember what I called it, the list of doom or whatever it was that I named it. But
and that was fantastic.
that,
I
but
loved
they still
that you did that.
tell me.
Yeah, you said I don't want to hear your list, and she was really quite insistent. The midwife was really quite insistent that you hear the list.
And the worst thing was that after that 36-week home birth, and she'd gone away and done the paperwork and posted it through the door, she actually highlighted all of the things that I said I didn't want to hear. And she said, please read and sign. I gave it to John, my husband, and said, this is from the midwife, read it and see what it says, because obviously I didn't want to let that into my subconscious. So he read it, he was like, don't read it, don't sign it, just leave it. I never reopened the envelope. But after saying to her at the 36-week appointment, I don't want to hear these things, and her still trying to say, oh, well, I'll have to tell you about ambulance times and I'll have to tell you about this. And I was like, no, thank you, no, thank you. She still then highlighted everything and said, please read and sign. So they don't respect the fact that you don't want to hear those things. Yeah, and I said to her, I'll sign whatever your piece of paper, but I'm not going to read it.
Yeah.
But
and that was really, it was I found that just kind of listening to that conversation really, I could just see how empowered you were in your conversation. Yeah. And just saying, like, I am aware of subconscious programming and how beliefs are laid down. I've worked really, really hard to ensure that I'm not fearful of birth, and so I'm protecting my space and being very aware of what I am introducing into my subconscious, and I don't want you to tell me. And she still tried to tell you. So I just thought, so yeah, you've got to be strong.
Yeah, it doesn't feel. Oh no, sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, I thought it was also really great that at that moment where we could see her, her employer expects her to read all of this out, so it's her job. So instead, so it was useful that John was there, so we could divert her sharing the information directly with you and just say, well, John, you have a read of the list. And it was almost like he was your gatekeeper. And she was happy to share the information with him. So
which part of me thinks that's a good thing, but then there's a part of me that thinks, should that be in John's subconscious as well? Because he's there to support me. I don't want him to be fearful. He wasn't. He was fine. He never had any doubt. He never was like, oh, I don't know if we should do the same. He had my back the whole time and believed that I could do it as much as I did. But there may be some husbands, partners, birth partners who are less confident, and maybe reading that would make them think, oh, I don't think we should do this. I think you should go to hospital. And then that means that someone may miss out to have the birth that they want because they haven't got the support, because the birth partner's being scared to death as well. But
that's a really good point. Really good point. Oh, Cosmo's just doing a big yawn.
Tired again.
Yeah, and so it's interesting that you said about the when your waters broke, there was a little bit of kind of like anxiety, like, oh
like it was starting. I felt he was a day early, or a day before his estimated due date, I felt like he was going to come before that. I felt I'd been having twinges for a few days. I'd felt really uncomfortable. I think I knew that it was coming, and I think the waiting, and I've never had my waters break naturally before. With Milo, my first, I was induced, so they were broken for me on the hospital bed, and it was all very medical. With Casper, they never went, he was born in them. So I'd never really properly experienced my waters going either. So it was just before 1 a.m, and I'd got up to help Milo because he needed a wee. And for a second, I was like, am I weeing? Like, what's going on here? And I was like, no, I'm not stopping. And for a split second, then I thought, right, I've actually got to do this now. And I'd had a few disagreements with my mum in the run up to it. So I'd felt like in the few days leading up to it, I'd come out of the really positive headspace that I was in because of some negative things that I'd gone through with her. So, and then when the waters broke, I thought, can I do this? Like, this is happening now. Like, I've got to do this now. And it only lasted for a few minutes. I told myself my affirmations, and was like, and I was excited, like I was desperate to meet him. I was totally fed up with being pregnant at this point. So then the anxiety changed to excitement and getting in the zone. But yeah, for a minute, which I guess is normal, I suppose. You're about to pretty big thing. But no, it was the best birth. I actually want to do it again, but John says no.
So tell us about the birth. I mean, and this for me is like, I just think is also just, so yeah, I'd just love to hear your birth story, because although I was there, I wasn't in the room. Your Sainsbury's shopping delivery arrived, I think, as Cosmo was crying. I'm not sure, but you can tell us more about that. But yeah, so I was busy trying to keep like everything really quiet for you. But so tell us about that. Yeah.
So yeah, it was 5th of October, just before 1 a.m. Like I say, Milo woke up saying he needed a wee. So I got up, and the second my feet touched the floor from the beds, my waters broke, and I sort of waddled through and woke John up and said, sort Milo out, my waters have broken. And then I think he was like, oh, right, it's happening. Because he was like, we were on tenterhooks, we knew it was going to come soon, we were just waiting. Like every night we went to bed saying, will it be tonight, will it be tonight? So then we both were like, it's tonight, it's happening. So I went to the bathroom, cleaned myself up. John sorted Milo out, put Milo back to bed. And we got back into bed, and the plan was to sleep for a little while because there was nothing much happening. My waters was leaking. I had a few crampy sort of feelings, but nothing much. So I thought I'll get some sleep while I can. But I couldn't settle. I couldn't get comfy. I just wanted to set up my birth space. Kathy, who I'd got the pull from, had said it can sometimes take a while to fill up depending on your water pressure. I didn't know how quick this birth was going to be. I expected it to be quicker than my last, being at home, being my third. So I thought I just couldn't settle. I just wanted to know that my birthing nest was all set up and ready to go. So I said to John, let's do the pool, let's go down and fill it up, because Kathy said if you put the cover on it, it'll stay warm. So we went downstairs, we got all the towels out, we pumped the pool up, filled it, turned all the fairy lights on, put my essential oils on, put some of my birthing music on. We got all the space set up, and it was really nice and cozy, and the twinkly lights, and I felt so comfortable down there. I didn't want to leave then to go back to bed, even though nothing was really happening. So I said to John, you go back to bed, go to sleep. I wanted to be on my own for a little while, just in my space, just in the peace and quiet. I was talking to him like, we're getting ready, we're going to meet you soon, all those type of things. changing my pad every 5 minutes because the water just didn't stop coming. That was the strangest sensation, was the constant losing of the water. I've never felt that before. So I actually found that a little bit inconvenient. It was a little bit distracting, like constantly having to like leaking through the pads. In the end, I just took my knickers off and just sat on one of those puppy pads because I thought, this is just, I'm just using all these pads and after. So yeah, then I dozed a little bit. I put my headphones in. I was listening to my hypnobirthing tracks and dozing on and off, pretty comfortable. Or I was contracting, but they were very gentle and very irregular. And then it was just probably just before 7 a.m. I heard two boys waking up. So while I could still talk and, freely move around between contractions, I decided to go up and tell them what was happening, and they were going to meet their brother today. And they were really excited. They jumped in mine and John's bed. And I was just breathing through the contractions, I explained to them what was happening, said that, my middle one is a real mummy's boy, and one of my worries was that he wasn't going to let John do like the majority of the care while I was in labour. He didn't even let him brush his teeth at bedtime. He's like, I want mummy to do it. So I sat down and talked to Casper about, Daddy's going to look after you today because, mummy's having the baby. And he was like, yeah, okay. And then I decided that I wanted to get in the bath. This was probably 8 o'clock-ish. I forget the times already, and he's only 10 weeks old, but it's probably about 8 o'clock I got in the bath, which was really nice. The warm water felt really nice, and the contractions or the surges, they really amped up then. And I was timing them on an app on my phone, and I was probably in the bath for over an hour. And by the time I was getting out of the bath, the app was telling me that it was time to go to hospital with how regular they were coming. That's when I messaged you. I think I remember sending you a screenshot of some of the timings. I was still really comfortable. I was telling myself my affirmations, and I felt excited. Like I was enjoying myself, as some people find that really strange to hear, but I genuinely was enjoying myself. And I just kept telling myself that I was going to meet him, and I was excited. I was doing it like I was at home. There was no one wanting to see how dilated I was or listen to his heartbeat. I was just in my zone. So when I got out of the bath, and at that point, I needed to concentrate more on my breathing and found it difficult to interact and talk to the boys. So that's when I took myself down to the living room. I remember sitting on the sofa for a little while. John was in and out of the room. I think about that point is when you arrived. And John said, do you want them to come in? And I just felt so comfortable just knowing what I was doing. And I was a little bit worried that even though I obviously knew that you'd be very quiet and not like, oh, hi, I just felt like if people walked in the room at that point, it might push me back a bit, because I felt so like secure in my nesting space, and it felt so just cozy, and like it was almost just me and him, even though John was in and out. So I just sat on the sofa for a little while, and I started to feel pushy. And I thought, I'll just do a few more and see how they go before I get in the pool. Do you not want this? And I guess he was born at 10 to 11. I wasn't in the pool for very long. I don't exactly know what time I got in the pool, but I knew that my body was pushing this point, so I thought, right, we'll get in. So, and it felt really nice to get into the water. It was really nice and warm, and it was like a comforting feeling. I could feel his head coming down, but it was like going back and forth a bit. So I remember thinking, I need to change positions here. I need to help him out a bit. So I changed positions, and his head was born. So then I changed positions again so I could sort of like catch him. And the cord was around his neck just once. So I just unwrapped the cord from around his neck. He was fine. And then his body was born. And I picked him out of the water and just put him straight on my chest. At this point, I noticed that the pool was probably not as warm as I needed it to be. And also I couldn't birth my placenta in the water because that was being sent off to be made into like smoothies. So she said, you need to birth it on dry land. So straight away I got out of the pool, because I did feel a little bit chilly. So I thought, you know, I need to get him out and get him warm. And with Casper, my middle, my placenta took over an hour to be born. So I was half expecting, well, I didn't really know what to expect with a placenta really, or how quickly that was going to come. That was another thing that they tried to bring fear around, is the birth of the placenta. I found that did I feed him before it was born? I can't remember if I fed him first, but I remember laying on the sofa with him, wrapping him in a towel. I got dry, put some clothes on, and then I stood up. I don't know whether that was your suggestion or Emma's suggestion.
It was Emma's. Emma was in the room with you, and
and I felt it coming straight away, and I remember saying, it's coming, and she was trying to find the bowl to catch it in.
Yeah.
But we missed, and it landed on, there was a puppy pad on the floor, and it landed on the floor. And yeah, I was surprised at how quick it came actually, which was really nice. And then I just remember laying on the sofa with him, feeding him, and just thinking, I'm just at home. Like it was such a nice feeling. Like I was proud of myself and of him, like that we'd done it. And I would do it again tomorrow. It felt so empowering, and it felt, like I say, I was proud of myself, and I was proud of him. And knowing that we're not going to have any more babies, feels so good to know that I got to birth in the way that I wanted, and that I fought for what I wanted, and almost like up you to the midwife, like, you know, you tried to put me off this, but I did it, you know.
Yeah. And what an amazing feeling.
Yeah.
Do you remember the boys coming into the room?
I didn't know that Casper was in the room until I'd pulled Cosmo out of the water and he was stood at the side of the pool. We'd always had the conversation with the boys that if they wanted to be in the room, that was fine. I was totally comfortable with that. We did show them some birth videos in the run up to it. I expected to be quiet. Every birth is different, but with Casper, I'd made no noise, and I don't remember making any noise with him either. I think I was in my headspace and I just didn't need to make any sound. But I had shown them some videos of free births, some quiet and some where the women made sound. And my eldest, Milo, who's autistic and quite sensitive to sound, had decided that he didn't want to be present to watch the baby being born. He changed his mind in the end because he did want to be. And then after seeing the videos, he said, actually, Mummy, I don't think I do, in case it's too noisy. It wasn't the actual birth. It wasn't watching the baby being born that put him off. It was the sound, but he is very sound sensitive. So obviously his wishes were respected and he was out of the room. Casper never really gave me a yes, I want to watch, or a no, I don't want to watch. But he obviously knew what was going on, and he sneaked down, unbeknown to me, and sat very, very quietly on the couch. And I guess I must have been around crowning point from what John said. And then when Cosmo had been born, and I like pulled him up and I looked up, he was just there at the side of the pool with the biggest smile on his face.
Oh, so beautiful.
And as soon as Cosmo was crying, I think that's when Milo ran down to see him.
Yeah.
Again, he was quite sound sensitive to the cry and was a little bit uncomfortable, and he was for the first few days of Cosmo's life. He didn't want to be around when he was crying. He's totally used to it now and he's fine. He just needs a bit of time to get used to the different noises and things. But I mean, he is completely adored by both of them, but Casper is obsessed with him, and I really do believe that is because he watched him being born. I think they've got a very special bond. Casper doesn't leave him alone. He calls him his little precious. And he's constantly hugging and kissing, and is he awake, mummy? I want to see his eyes, and like I want to hold him, can I cuddle him? Like he absolutely adores him, and I feel he got to see a very positive, he got to see him being born, and that is something that I really wanted for him. Like I say, they're never going to actually give birth, but I wanted them to see what birth can be like, and that it's not to be feared.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was, yeah. I mean, it was amazing. Like I said, I would do it again tomorrow, but John says I'm not allowed anymore. But, but it was, yeah, it was amazing.
Oh,
and I
so
feel
incredible. And when did you tell the midwife?
So the midwife came, I guess it must have been, I think you left at 4ish, didn't you, that day? He was born at 10 to 11. I think you left about 4. I feel it might have been about 5 o'clock. It wasn't my community midwife, but 2 midwives came to do the checks on him. Did
you phone them or did John phone them and say?
Okay, so John phoned them probably maybe an hour after he was born to say that he'd been born, and the response was, oh my gosh, do you need an ambulance? And John, he's very sarcastic and a bit blunt in his humour, was like, well, no, they're not dying, he's been born, like it's fine, because it was just this big panic of, oh my gosh, you've had a baby without any medical professional there, something must be wrong. He was like, they're absolutely fine, we're just letting you know that he's being born and that you can come and do the checks, because I'm rhesus negative and I hadn't quite decided at that point whether I was going to have the anti-D. I declined it in the end, but so that they said, right, well, we'll come. So it was about 5 o'clock that they came, and she turned around and said to me, did you plan to free birth? So at that point I said, well, I've got nothing to lose now, have I? So I was honest and I said, yes, I did. She went, well, that's very naughty. She was joking but serious, if you know what I mean. It's like one of those things where you say what you mean in a jokey way. I think she wasn't rude or horrible about it, but obviously she's thinking free birthing is just not the done thing, and they did the checks.
It's almost unacceptable.
Yeah, like how could you possibly do this without a midwife? And they did the checks on him, which, to be honest, I wasn't sure whether I was going to let them do. When Milo was born, the checks were really, really upsetting. Like, they took him off me, and at this point, I'm a first-time mum and I don't know my rights, and I didn't have the confidence that I do now, and I let them take him off me, and they took him off me, and they were doing all the checks, and he was screaming, like really, really screaming, and I wanted to get my baby back. Like, every instinct in my body was like, take your baby back, but they wouldn't let me take him back, and they carried on doing all the checks with him screaming. So for Casper and for Cosmo, I was very much like, if I don't want you to take him to do the checks, then you're not taking him, sort of thing. But as it turns out, when they came, they were really lovely, despite the initial comment of me being naughty. They were nice, and he was very settled, and they were very gentle with him. And he was quite content in letting them do what they were doing. So he did have all of the checks. And then I was going to say something, I've lost my train of thought. They asked about vitamin K and all those things, and I did feel like those two midwives were quite respectful of me not wanting to have vitamin K and things like that, because a lot of my community midwife, as lovely as she was quite pushy to have all the vaccines and things, like my whooping cough and my flu, and him to have the vitamin K. So they were quite respectful of all that. He obviously, his temperature, that's what I was going to say. His temperature was a tiny bit low, and I mean tiny, like, I can't remember, I think she said they want him to be 36. I can't remember the exact temperature that they say they want the babies to be, and if they're cooler than that, you know, they're not comfortable with it. He was teeny tiny bit low. We were in bed and we were doing skin to skin, and he was feeding and he was fine. But they were like, I think you need to take him to hospital because his temperature's a little bit low. I mean, don't get me wrong, if it had been really low, then I wouldn't have left him too cold, but it was the teeniest, tiniest bit low, like, I can't remember.
Like, instead of being 36.5, maybe it was 36.4 or something. Do you mean something like that?
Yeah, it was barely low.
Yeah.
And I knew that I was doing the right thing with the skin to skin and the feeding anyway. And why did I want to take him to hospital for what? I mean, how would they have wound him up in a machine? Like, how can a machine do a better job than me? Like, you know. So I declined, obviously. And she said, well, you need to keep taking his temperature, and if it gets lower, then you'll have to bring him in. So then for a second there, she did give me a bit of anxiety, because I'm thinking, I've just done all of this at home. My body's done exactly what it needed to do. He's done exactly what he needed to do. And now you're telling me that he needs to go into hospital.
Yeah.
He was fine. I didn't recheck his temperature because I thought, I'm not going to give myself that worry. I knew he was fine. He was on me. He was feeding. I put a hat on him. And I thought, I'm not even going to give in to this fear.
Yeah.
So we spent the night just having skin to skin, and he had lots of milk. He loves his milk, still loves his milk, never lost any birth weight. Chunky little monkey.
He's gorgeous.
Yeah. Are you talking? Oh dear. He's got a bit of a cold, courtesy of Casper. So yeah, we just spent the night in bed, and not having the hospital food or the hospital bed or having to wait for Auntie D or any of those things, just being at home, it was just the best, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when the midwives came to do those checks on him, did they want to do any checks on you?
Yeah.
And how did you feel about that?
They wanted to check me. She made a bit of a sarky comment about my bleeding. She said, well, I don't know what to write down on this piece of paper because I don't know how much blood you've lost. So at that point I said, well, I'm bleeding no more than I did after my first two. And I remember you checking my blood loss when I was on the sofa with him, and I said, you know, the doula checked and was fine, and there was not much blood in the pool. and I haven't, like, I'd not even soaked through one pad at this point. I was still wearing the same pad, so that showed me that, you know, I wasn't bleeding too heavily. There was no clots or anything like that, so I was like, it's fine. So I don't know what she wrote on the form, but she sort of raised her eyebrows a bit, like, you know, she didn't know what to write down.
There was actually no blood in the pool. It was just a bit murky, just from like birth fluid, but no blood. And I was really quite surprised, because the puppy pad that you were laying on the sofa was like, I don't know, maybe had like, there was hardly any blood at all. So yeah.
So and then they obviously wanted to examine me, and I could tell that I was swollen, but that I'd not torn. So I declined. I can't remember what her response was to that. She was fine about it. I'm just going to pass him to John for a minute. John, can you just take him, please? I was 2 minutes. I can't remember what her response was to that, but they weren't pushy about me being checked. They were fine about that. And then they were asking whether I wanted him to have the heel prick test and the hearing test, and I'd not decided at that point. And again, they were quite respectful about that. They weren't too pushy. In the end, I did get those tests done. But I do feel like if I didn't want to, they would have been okay with it, at least the 2 midwives that came after he was born. I don't know how long they were here for. They did what they need to do. They weighed him. Although she did say this weight won't be totally accurate, because obviously he's fed all day. You know, he's not just being born. Because I think it was about 5-ish that they came. But he was 7'13", so he was the biggest out of the 3 of them. And yeah, they left, and me and Cosmo just stayed in bed, and the boys jumped into bed, and it was just amazing.
Sounds amazing.
And I love all my children equally. Of course, that goes without saying. But there's something about Cosmo, there's this, it's really hard to describe, but I feel extra connected to him, I think, because we did it together.
Yeah.
I feel obviously you have this like rush of love and all these amazing feelings for your baby, no matter how you give birth, I guess, when your baby's born. And I had that same feeling for all 3 of them, but it was after, I think, like sat in bed with him, just like looking at him, thinking like, you know, we did that together. And I feel like there's just this extra bond there, if that makes sense, like, because it was just me and him, and he did his job and I did mine, and no one else, we didn't need anyone else.
What an amazing team.
Yeah. So yeah,
that's amazing. And now I know you need to go. But is there anything that like, what's the one thing you would say to anybody who might be listening to your story and thinking about you know, free birth or birthing outside of the system?
To listen to your own gut instincts and not let other people's fears in your subconscious. Do what makes you feel comfortable, and don't let anyone else tell you that you can't do it, because if you want to, then you can. And don't let other people tell you their negative birth stories. When I was pregnant with Cosmo, a friend had just had her little boy, and she had an induction by her own choice. and it was very medical, and she wanted to tell me about the epidural and how it didn't work. And I said to her, I'm going to have to stop you there. I'm sorry, but I don't want to hear negative things. And I think be confident enough to say to people, I don't need to hear that. Someone else's fears don't need to be your reality. You know, I guess just even my community midwife admitted that she followed her gut instincts. She's got 3 children. She did have 1 or 2 of them at home, but a third it might have been, I can't remember the details. She said she just had a feeling that she should be in hospital, and the reason why slips my mind, but I think the baby did need some extra care after birth. So it just goes to show that you do know deep down like what your baby needs, and only you know that. The midwife can't tell me what my baby needs. You know what your baby needs. So if you think to follow your gut instincts, like I knew the whole way along, apart from the odd moment of doubt from like after I'd been in to see the consultant, for example, and she told me I might die. No one can completely block out all of those things that she'd thrown at me in that appointment. So, I had to work hard that evening and probably the following day to like realign myself back with, no, you're fine.
And I think having a partner like John probably helps with that a lot.
He's very open-minded. He's like, he wouldn't let the fear in either. We're both very similar in trying to think positively all the time and not let the negative thoughts in. So it didn't scare him either. Not that it was at any appointments, because COVID didn't allow him to come to any of those things. But just go with your gut instincts. Don't let anyone else's fears be your reality. And if you think you can do it, then you can. And it's empowering. And have the birth that you want.
Amazing. You are amazing. And thank you so much for sharing this with me again today, and for letting me be a part of your journey.
Because you were a big part of the journey. Like, I don't think that I would have had all of the confidence that I did if it wasn't for you, like having my back and telling me, you do have choice, you don't have to do what you're told, you don't have to do this, you don't have to do that. Like, I think every woman needs that. Like, it feels like at your most vulnerable time, all of your choices are stripped away and that you just have to do as you're told. And everyone needs a Mel in their life to be like, no, you don't, you make the choice, you do what you want to do, because they do try to take that voice away from you for whatever. I'm not quite sure why they want to do that, but they do. And it's sad, really. Like, my sister, she hasn't had any children yet, she's already terrified. First thing I'm doing when she gets pregnant, which hopefully will be soon, she gets married soon, will be a hypnobirthing course.
Give me that book.
And just try and, it's like society's already created that fear in her, like she's not even given birth yet.
So that's really interesting as well, because you've mentioned hypnobirthing a few times, and I always try and encourage people to start doing the hypnobirthing exercises really as far, the meditations and things, as early on as possible. Did you find that was the case for you? Or because it's reprogramming?
I was with Casper, it was a lot more intense, was the hypnobirthing, because we'd never done it before. We did the full course, and I practiced every night in the bath, listening to the tracks, the affirmations. Like, it was a really integral part of my pregnancy, and it was very important to me that I had a very different birth from Milo's. And then with Cosmo, we just did a refresher. So it was only a few hours rather than being a full course. It was just a few hours one evening was the refresher. But it all came back to me, and I felt like I knew what I was doing more, and it just was natural. I would just lay in bed every night listening to the Catherine Graves, and every night before I shut my eyes I would say, you're healthy, your baby's healthy, and your body knows what it's doing. And I just didn't let anything else enter my subconscious. And I think that's, you've got to really keep up with doing it. You know, it's not, you can't just do your refresher course and then expect it to work. Like, it's something you've got to really, you can't give your subconscious any time to think anything else. But it works, it really works. And it's, like Casper and Cosmo's births, I enjoyed both of them. And I think hypnobirthing is a massive part of that, because it puts you in such a good headspace and it takes the fear away. With Milo's, I was petrified and it was awful. His birth was awful. And that's because I let the fear take over. You know, I think from in the transitioning stage of both Casper and Cosmo, I felt that the panic was there. You know, it was like, okay, I don't know what it is about transition that makes you feel like that, but because of hypnobirthing both times, I could push that back down and keep the calm. Without hypnobirthing, I don't know whether I would have been able to do that in the same way. And it's keeping the calm that gives you the pleasant experience, because if you let the panic take over, then once it's gone, you can't get it back, can you? You know, once you let the panic set in, it's there. But the hypnobirthing, great tool. I recommend it to everyone. Any friend who is pregnant, I'm like, you need to hypnobirth.
Amazing.
The free birthing, I would like to advertise that more, but I think it's quite a niche thing, isn't it? There's been I haven't told everybody that I've free birthed, not because I'm not proud of it or that I don't want to shout it from the rooftops, I guess, just because, well, I don't know really, because I don't want to start a debate or like, I guess I just want to keep it in my little bubble of it was amazing. I don't want anyone else's outside influences to tell me otherwise, I suppose. But people who I have told have all been like, what? You gave birth to a midwife? Like, they're all shocked. Every single, in fact, I've got quite a good friend who's pregnant now, and she is on the brink of deciding whether she wants to free birth. She's really wants to be out of the system as well, and she does not want to give birth in hospital, and she doesn't want an NHS midwife. But her husband is a bit more nervous about it and really wants a midwife there. They're considering paying for a private midwife, which obviously costs an arm and a leg. And I've said, get a doula, you know, free birth, just, you know, but I don't know, which she's yet to make a decision of what happens. Her husband is definitely not as supportive. Not that he's not supportive to her, just supportive of a free birth as John was. You know, I'm just used to John being like, yeah, let's do it, you know, so but yeah, hopefully she has a good experience, whatever she chooses. But you've been good, so I've given her your details.
Thank you. And I think it's just, I kind of think that book that I recommended to you called Freebirth by Sarah Schmidt is useful to read however you choose, what, like whether you choose to have a free birth or a midwife supported birth at home, or you know, a physiological birth in hospital. it helps you to understand what your body can do and what it's made to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That was the best book. I read that from cover to cover. In fact, that's a little bit of a lie. I didn't read right to the end because there was some stories there of free births that didn't happen, where they'd had to transfer to hospital. So I skipped that section. But yeah, I mean, when Cosmo was born and the cord was around his neck, I almost expected that to be the case. But after reading the book, it didn't scare me in any way, you know, didn't think he was not going to be breathing or that he was going to be strangling him. It was very loose anyway, and it was only around once, but it was that book that made me aware that that could be the case and that it's fine. You know, a cord really couldn't really strangle a baby anyway. Just unwrap it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it reading the stories of the women who had free birth, there was one in particular that really resonated with me, and I kept my bookmarking that page and I would read it over and over again. And it, especially if I'd had an appointment with a consultant or something, you know, I'd been to see my midwife that day and she told me in 15 years she's seen lots of horrible things go wrong. I was like, you know, I would read that over and over again and think, no, like, that's going to be my story, like, you know. So yeah, I would recommend that book to anybody. It was a really good book.
Amazing. Thank you. I'm going to stop the recording. Actually, before I stop the recording, just so that I've got a record of it, are you happy for me? How are you happy for me to share this?
Yeah, you can share it wherever with anyone. Let's get the message out there that, you know, you can birth in a different way.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Emma.